I started playing games when I was very young. My parents gave me a Nintendo 3DS when I was 6 years old. Yes, I'm only 18, okay? At least I'm old enough to play any kind of game. So I have a lot of nostalgia for these games, and I think that if I hadn't been exposed to them at a young age, I wouldn't have started to design them myself. Now that I'm a game developer, I have a unique opportunity to talk about games not only from a consumer's perspective, but also from a developer's point of view. There are dozens of game reviews on YouTube, but only a few are from people who actually make games themselves. Game design has always fascinated me, so let's try to understand some key concepts that each of these 10 examples can teach us. Plus, let me gush about why I think these games are so good. Before we begin, I just want to reinforce that what I say throughout this video is just my own opinion. When you create some sort of artistic work and show it to an audience, there will always be different interpretations and opinions from what you were expecting. Some people will like it and some will not. Please keep that in mind and let's try to have friendly discussions. I also want to talk about some experiences that I hold very close to my heart, so this will be a very special video for me. If you want to watch this while you are doing chores or something else, that's fine. I think this video will be long enough for that. Anyways, let's start from the beginning of my gaming journey with... I think older games used to be a lot simpler. Now if you don't have absolutely gorgeous graphics or amazingly deep gameplay, people won't like it. But back then, man, give me Mario and some Newton-defying platforms to jump on and I'll be happy. Super Mario 3D Land was the first game I got on the 3DS, along with Mario Kart 7. And although I played both these games a fair bit, I think 3D Land was the most impactful one. This game, and Mario games in general, have always been about creativity. It doesn't have to make sense, that's usually not the point. It just has to be fun and different. There isn't any cohesion between stages. You might go from a desert canyon level, to a dungeon level, to grassy platforms in the sky, all in the same world. I think Nintendo didn't want to be restricted to a specific theme in each zone, like they usually do. Instead, they can go wild with their ideas without needing to worry about making 5 desert theme levels for a desert world. I don't remember how my first experience playing the game was, I just know that I was very bad at it, especially in later levels. After losing a ton of times, I vaguely remember handing my 3DS to my older brother, so that he could beat the final boss for me. He did that fairly quickly, which is a bit embarrassing. Mario games are usually not that hard after all, especially not this one. But I still enjoyed it a lot, and I have been replaying it ever since. And no, I don't have any difficulty beating the final boss now, it's actually quite easy. I've probably beaten the main campaign like 20 times. I think this is a highly replayable game and I basically have all the levels memorized. 3D Land uses some clever techniques to make you play the game even after you've rolled the credits. First, there's collectibles. Every stage has 3 gold coins for you to collect, so if you want 100% the game, you have to keep an eye out for them. And sometimes they are in hard to reach places, which makes it more challenging. And second, after you beat the final level, a new special world unlocks. Sorry, scratch that. 8 new special worlds unlock, essentially doubling the game's length. How are the devs able to do this? Well, most of these stages are actually recycled versions from the normal campaign, but with simple changes like new enemies and harder obstacles. Obviously, this isn't the only game designed this way. Most platformers have collectibles that incentivize risk and also some extra stages after you beat the game. This one just does both these things well, in my opinion, and is very underrated. Looking back, in terms of Mario games, this one isn't really that special. In fact, most people consider it to be the worst 3D Mario. I'm not so sure about that, but maybe the fact that this was the first one I played ended up changing my own perspective of the game. Nostalgia is a strong emotion after all. Moving on to the direct competitor of Nintendo, my brothers also had a PlayStation 2 at home with a somewhat large selection of games, so I had a few opportunities to play those. Amongst them, the ones that I played most were by far Sly 2 and 3. I always struggled a lot with that console, because of the controls. So there's X, and circle, and square? What is this, preschool? Why are these shapes and symbols? But playing Sly 2 and 3 back then was like a ritual in my house. Every summer, when you got free from school, we would all have a Sly Cooper phase. I would play a bit, then one of my brothers would play while I was watching, and we would constantly switch back and forth. And to explain why I think this game was so fun to play, we have to understand the concept of fantasy in games. There are multiple videos that explain this better, but basically, playing a game means experiencing the role of the main character, and that's what makes gaming so entertaining, because it allows us to live in a world that doesn't exist, a fantasy, and we feel as if we are truly there. For instance, the idea of a game called Truck Simulator initially sounds kinda stupid, right? Why would someone play a game where you're just driving through a country on a truck? Well, because maybe, for some people, it would be enjoyable to drive a truck in real life, but because they don't have a license, this simulator allows them to fulfill that dream, without actually having to steal a truck and break a dozen laws. For me, Sly Cooper is fun because of the same reasons. The three main characters are thieves, and throughout the game they have to plan heists and do missions. It's a cool hook and something that you wouldn't be able to achieve in the real world. You can also walk around the map and pickpocket random enemies to get more money for upgrades. I love doing this as well. It's another way the game deepens the feeling of the player being an edgy raccoon thief. The games are full of humor, so they don't take themselves too seriously. I remember an iconic mission from Sly 3 where you have to insult a pirate.
You're a parrot-loving, seaweed-slurping bag of vomit.
They design it to be very cartoonish, so there's no blood or any real consequence to stealing. It lifts up the vibe and doesn't make you feel bad for doing something morally wrong. It's almost freeing in a way. And speaking of freedom, Minecraft is a very special game. When it came out, there really wasn't anything like it. It was truly lightning in a bottle. I don't remember when I started playing it, but I'm pretty sure I first had it on my tablet when I was younger. My dad also had it on his old phone, and I remember spending some time trying to build a large castle in creative mode. Honestly, calling it a castle is an overstatement. I always preferred to play in creative, because playing in survival mode was kinda hard, and what I really enjoyed was how the game incorporated creativity. In this game, the entire world is like a canvas for you to paint on, and these blocks are your ink. You basically have full freedom on what to build, the only limitation being the number of different block types that exist. So essentially, when you start a new save, there are infinite possibilities. You are the one that decides what to do in your randomly generated world. You could just try to beat the game by defeating the Ender Dragon. You could start building a new town to live in. Heck, you could try to break every single block in your world and see how long that takes. However, over the years, my perspective of the game has shifted, and unfortunately, my issue with this game is exactly that. It's over-reliance on freedom and imagination. There isn't any story, at least in the default Java version, and no interesting characters or quests. It's this strange situation where you kinda have to make the game yourself, and sometimes I just don't have the energy to do that. I want to play something, designed by people, with a story to follow and with a carefully thought-out campaign. I always have these weird Minecraft phases where I play the game for a week or two and then forget about it. By the time I play it again, a few months later, I don't remember what I was doing anymore, so I just start a new world and do the entire sequence of getting wood, making crafting table, craft pickaxe, break rock, make better pickaxe, search for iron and coal, grab iron, make better tools, etc. all over again. So essentially, what I mean by this is that allowing the players to be creative while playing a game is really fun, and there's a large audience for that, but there's a point where it's still nice to have something a bit more linear. If a game can strike a balance between giving us the freedom to do anything we want, and also having some pre-made story and level design, that would be extra neat. Oh wait, a game like that kinda already exists. It's called... My goal isn't really to compare this game to Minecraft. I mean, they are two completely different genres. I just wanted to emphasize how both these games incorporated player freedom in very distinct ways. While Minecraft lets you build anything in a seemingly infinite world, Breath of the Wild lets you explore and play around in its world in a way that the developers have probably intended. Well, at least in the Great Plateau. After that, everything is fair game. Now what do I mean by this? To understand how the Zelda team built the interesting map to explore, we have to learn about points of interest, or POIs. These are landmarks that the designers place around the map to grab your attention towards that area. These places usually contain valuable items or a good reward for the player. For instance, in this Zelda game, basically anything is a point of interest. It can be a shrine, a tower, a new enemy camp, a village, a large mountain, or even just an odd group of rocks. I hate you so much. And in this way, the Zelda team lets us get lost in this world, while we also lose any sense of time, because we just wanted to do this simple shrine, but then we see 20 other unique things that grab our attention, so we play a bit more, and when we finally look at the clock, we realize it's been 5 hours and we missed our brother's wedding. Not a true story, I think. Hopefully that hasn't happened to anyone. And there are even more clever ways the Zelda team designed this world. They put mountains in strategic spots so that they could hide an entire new biome behind them. And also, when they were playtesting the game, they made sure to place shrines and Koroks in places that people usually wouldn't cross, so that you could have an incentive to travel to the main paths. They created new techniques for brilliant world design, and in this way, we always have something fun to discover. That's why I tend to prefer exploring a world that was carefully planned out by the developers over a randomly generated one like Minecraft. Again, this is just how I view these kinds of games. I fondly remember the summer of 2018, which was when I got Breath of the Wild. Me and my brother spent an entire summer playing the game. Sometimes we would even pass the controller around so that everyone had a chance to play. When one of us discovered something, or a secret game mechanic, we would tell the others about it, and we were always there watching each other play. It was such a memorable experience that no other game has managed to replicate ever since. Now, if that's not the sign of an amazingly designed open world game, I don't know what is. I know it's weird to make a whole category for this, but just hear me out, okay? Mobile games were the first type of games I started playing. Even before the 3DS, when I was very young, I got a tablet on my birthday, and I still have a very distinct memory of downloading and playing Subway Surfers for the first time. It was like a whole new world just opened up for me. These games that I now play on my phone have always been a part of me. They were there literally throughout my entire childhood, and they now are a part of my daily routine. Right now, my current obsession is playing chess. I go to the app every day to do the daily challenge, and then I go play against bots. I'm nowhere near good at it, but I like to push myself, and I think I'm slowly improving. I don't know if chess is the best example, but I just wanted to point out that the reason why I play mobile games so much is because of versatility. I always carry my phone with me. It's a gadget that is light, useful, and entertaining to use. That's also why I like the portability of the Switch, by the way. And because I always have it around, whenever I have some downtime, like when I'm waiting in line or during one of my college breaks, I often find myself turning on my phone to play something. I know this probably sounds like an unhealthy habit, but more often than not, this has actually been a really good conversation starter. If I find someone that also plays Clash Royale, I can just ask him or her for a friendly fight, and we can have a nice moment together. Or if I'm playing a game that catches someone's interest, I can explain it to them and we can start to discuss it together. The only disadvantage of this is that maybe we can just try to live in the moment, you know, but who does that in 2024 anyways? I like mobile games because I can just turn off my brain and spend my time doing something. I think there's a nice value in that. Obviously, I still prefer most console games. Those are much more exciting to play. Speaking of which, after a few years with just my 3DS and a bunch of asking around, my parents finally decided to give me a Nintendo Switch for Christmas. I basically exploded in joy. I was over the moon. And on that note, let's talk about my first Switch game, Mario Odyssey. This game is a collectathon. Your goal throughout the levels is to collect moons so that your ship can travel further to even more new kingdoms. The gameplay loop for this game is exceptionally well designed and I have no complaints there. Now I could talk about the amazing movement that Mario has, or the creative ways the game lets you interact with its enemies, but let's shift our focus to something kind of unexpected, because I really enjoy how this game incorporates competitiveness. You're probably thinking, oh my god, this guy has completely lost it, how can you talk about a Mario game being competitive at all? And to answer that, I think you're probably forgetting about a little thing called leaderboards and also speedrunning. Mario Odyssey has an online minigame called Koopa Freerunning, and oh boy, I got really into it a while ago. I consider myself a very casual gamer. I'm not really good at anything, I usually can speedrun games, but there's something about this side mode that sparked my interest. Your goal is just to race from the start to the finish line in as little time as possible, almost like a mini speedrun. And depending on how much time you took, you'll be placed in a global leaderboard with all the other players' times. I don't know how my stupid little brain works, but something about climbing to the top of this leaderboard is super rewarding for me. I wanted to be in the top 1000 players, which is hard, that's like the top 1%, so I trained and studied the real speedrunners techniques like instant roll cancel, dive vaulting and a few others. There were especially tricky kingdoms like the Luncheon Kingdom. That one makes me want to unsubscribe leaving, but I actually got pretty good times in some of them. I think what makes this game so rewarding to speedrun is the movement. Using Cappy to jump around and really mastering all of Mario's moveset is very satisfying. I feel like it was built for this. So Mario Odyssey officially introduced me to speedrunning, which I'm still really bad at, but I still occasionally enjoy looking up the world records of other games that make me start questioning my own existence. Now this is where I lose all my viewers. Okay, let me tell you a little story that will hopefully explain why I'm defending Fortnite. It was March 2020, and the pandemic was just starting out. I got sent home, and for a while I didn't have anything to do, so I started playing Fortnite on my laptop. At the time, I was playing alone because I didn't have any friends to play with, and it was right when Chapter 2 Season 2 came out. That was an amazing season. There were a bunch of new bosses scattered throughout the map, and if you managed to defeat them, they would drop these legendary weapons. It was almost a guaranteed win, and one of them would give you the grappler gun, with infinite ammo. This was so fun to use, I miss it so much. You could just launch yourself around the map with incredible speed and basically avoid every fight. It was kinda broken actually, but the point is, I have very fond memories of me playing Fortnite at the beginning of the pandemic. It kept me entertained and made me forget how strange the world was outside. I will always associate that with this game. If I was feeling down, I could always rely on it to make me feel better. The development of Fortnite was really strange though. They announced it as a PvE survival game with base building mechanics, where you defend against waves of zombies. So the Battle Royale mode it has today wasn't even part of their original plan. They just decided during development that because other popular games were succeeding in that genre, it would be smart to also add it to their own game. And boom, Fortnite Battle Royale exploded in popularity and no one talks about Save the World anymore, the other mode I was mentioning. I believe this teaches a very important lesson. Sometimes when making a game, your original plan may differ from the final result, and there are cases where it's worth making changes to achieve a more successful game. And sure, if you think about its impact in the gaming industry, this game is awful. It introduced season passes, which every single game started copying after 2018. Epic Games treats its employees like shit. Everything behind the scenes sucks. But we can't ignore the fact that what Epic made is actually a somewhat enjoyable game, if we don't catch any sweaty 9-year-olds. Also, playing Zero Build is really good. You should definitely try it if you're not good at building fast like me. I recently played Security Breach for the first time. I had already heard of it and watched some gameplay when it originally came out. I just thought that I wouldn't play it because I didn't want to buy it on my Switch. That game does not run well enough for me. But when I finally got a new laptop, I ended up buying it because, despite not really liking horror games, this one specifically caught my attention. FNAF games are generally not my cup of tea. But exploring a massive pizzaplex and dodging the animatronics while playing these 80s inspired minigames, that seemed like fun. It felt like a nicer, more toned down version of a horror game, and that's exactly what I wanted. I don't have the balls to play one of those scary horror games for grown-ups, no. Give me Freddy Fazbear dancing instead. Sure, there were occasional glitches and a few questionable gameplay choices, but I beat the game and I don't regret it. However, something very unusual started happening once I finished Security Breach. I got on this rabbit hole of playing other horror games. I tried Poppy Playtime Chapter 1 and 2, I tried Indigo Park, I tried, yes, Garden of Banban, I later tried Finding Frankie, I even tried older FNAF games. And that led me to finally finding out that I enjoy mascot horror games. Much more than what I initially thought. There's something very appealing about them to me. Maybe it's because most of them have interesting environments to explore, or because of the unique creature designs, or the less intense horror elements, or maybe all of these combined. What matters is that my original decision of playing Security Breach has led me to discover a whole new genre of games that I hadn't considered playing before. I finally understood why people enjoy horror games. It's exhilarating. Barely escaping a massive, ungodly creature that's chasing you really gets your heart pumping. It's so much fun. And sure, I understand that some people don't like these types of games because it's not real horror and they tend to overprice them and make a ton of merchandise for profit. But I don't care about all that. Just give me an enjoyable game with a cool place to explore and I'll play it, even if it's not that well received. See, that's the thing. You don't need to hate a game just because everyone else hates it as well. Just enjoy your time with it and try to make your own opinion. That's how everyone should approach games. The last two games I'll show have been the biggest inspiration for my game Loss, so that's why I left them for the very end. Starting off with Hello Neighbor 2, I think this one does a much better job at being a well-designed puzzle game compared to its predecessor. The first game was confusing and bad and just not really that much fun to play after the second house. Now the second one, after some patches, I think turned out to be a much better experience. Basically, you have multiple houses to explore and you try to find various items and solve puzzles while avoiding the AI residents. One thing I really enjoy about this game is its approach to, let's call them, streamlined puzzles. When designing an interesting problem for the player, you shouldn't focus on making it as difficult as possible to solve. Instead, it's much better to strike a balance between confusion and clarity. This game does that. For example, when you go to the kitchen in a neighbor's place and find a dollhouse, after exploring a bit, you see this drawing on the fridge. So your goal is pretty obvious. You need to find these dolls and place them on the tiny house. Essentially, this puzzle already gives you point A and B, you just need to figure out how to get from one to the other. And another thing that most people don't think about is that what you need to find in order to solve a puzzle is usually close to where you're supposed to bring it. So for the dollhouse, you don't need to go outside or upstairs, because everything is on the same floor. So while you're exploring these rooms, you're naturally storing what you saw in your memory, so that afterwards, when you know what you're looking for, you can come back and have that aha moment. Very clever. I don't have much more to say about this game. I think what Hello Neighbor 2 taught me is that when designing puzzles, you need to give the right amount of information to the player. Not so much that it becomes a breeze, but also not so little that everyone just gives up and searches for the solution online. This final game is really exceptional. If you like visual storytelling games, I recommend you try What Remains of Edith Finch before watching this part of the video. I'm going to spoil a portion towards the end of the game that has resonated with me and many others. You have been warned. The premise is straightforward. In this game, you're a teenage girl called Edith Finch that goes back to her old family house and tries to figure out why everyone else in her family is dead. So you walk around the house and go to the rooms of each family member, and that's when you usually get a flashback on how they died. In some cases, it's shown more like a symbolism, but in the rest of them, you quickly understand what happened. It's a beautiful, bittersweet story that is executed perfectly in the form of a walking simulator. And yes, you're also exploring an environment in this one. I think I'm starting to see a pattern. So, what's the lesson that we can learn from this game? It's simple. How to write a compelling and emotional story. I'll give you my favorite example. When you go to Louis Finch's room, we find a letter that tells us how he passed away when he was about to turn 22 years old. It's a letter from his psychiatrist that was treating him for substance abuse. She explains to us how Louis's brain worked, how his imagination ran wild while he was working at the cannery. And that's when we start to play as him. There's this thought bubble that appears at the corner of the screen that we can control with the WASD keys. This is where it gets clever. We also have to use the mouse to chop this fish using a saw while he's thinking. So we control both minigames at the same time. Keep that in mind. Throughout the story, his thoughts keep becoming stronger and stronger, and soon enough, he stops distinguishing what's real and what's not. In fact, he starts to think that the real Louis was the one that was in his thoughts, creating a little kingdom to rule over. By the end, the real world disappears, and you get to control Louis rising to the throne of his newly formed kingdom. There is only one thing left for him to do. He has to kneel down and receive the crown. I still have chills watching this part of the game. When you hear the chop of the head, God, it's so well executed. And you know what's crazy? Throughout this entire section, you get so used to swinging the mouse around to throw the fish that you just start to forget what your hand is doing. It becomes second nature, just like how Louis felt when he was working there. He got lost in his own thoughts, trying to escape the monotony of his life. Now that's how you write a story. Not only that, that's how you make a story so interactive in a game. You make the player feel what the character is feeling. 10 out of 10. I wish I could forget this game so that I could play it again for the first time. Phew, that's it. Those were the 10 games that I wanted to focus on. These are just some that have inspired me to follow a game dev career, and I hope that I can take some of these lessons and apply them to my future projects. Obviously, I haven't played all the games that exist, so there are probably way better examples of games that were even more well designed, but I just wanted to focus on the ones that I had experience with. I also wanted to make sure that you left this video knowing something new. So, here's what we learned. Replayability can be achieved with simple changes to the levels and collectibles. levels, and fantasy in games is affected by changing the role of the main characters. Also, letting the players be creative makes for a more enjoyable experience, and an open world is as fun to explore as its points of interest. Mobile games are more versatile to play, and leaderboards can be seriously addictive. Changing the vision of your game may lead to unexpected success, and playing a new genre every once in a while may just reveal hidden gems. Finally, streamlined puzzles can make the player feel clever, and to write an amazing story, you just need to make a character literally chop his head off because he's delusional. That last one is a joke. But above all, we'll learn that game design is a really complex task to get right. There is no definitive way to make a game, and creativity shines in this industry. Understanding how and why these games were developed like this makes me appreciate them even more as an art form. I think that's what makes this such an interesting topic, don't you think?